Ask an Irish-American family where the dark hair came from, and you will hear the same answer everywhere, from Boston to San Francisco: the Spanish Armada. The story goes that in 1588, the Great Fleet was scattered by storms off the coast of Ireland, that the survivors came ashore in Galway and Mayo and Donegal, and that they stayed, married into the local families, settled in the West, and left behind a strain of dark-haired, dark-eyed Irish who never looked like the red-headed postcard. The Black Irish. It is one of the most repeated origin stories in the entire Irish diaspora. It is also, almost entirely, wrong. Not because those ships did not wreck. They did, around 24 of them, along that coast, in a matter of weeks. But what happened to the men who reached the beach is not the story your family tells, and the real reason for the dark hair is far older, far stranger, and comes from the opposite direction on the map. These are 15 Black Irish surnames, and what each one actually reveals about where your family came from. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and what county your people came out of. Any name, any county. And subscribe. The names on this list came from your comments. First, what actually happened in 1588? The Armada was beaten in the English Channel and could not go back the way it came, so it ran north around Scotland and turned down the west coast of Ireland to reach Spain. The Atlantic caught it. Ships broke apart on the rocks of Sligo, Mayo, Clare and Donegal, and thousands of men drowned in sight of land. The ones who made it ashore did not marry into the country. The English administration in Ireland issued orders to put Spanish survivors to death, and they were hunted along the coast and killed in large numbers, on the beaches, in the dunes, wherever they were found. Some were stripped and robbed by locals. A number escaped north into Ulster and were smuggled to Scotland. The survivors who lived out their lives in the west of Ireland and founded families were a scattering of men, not a population. You cannot get a nationwide look out of a few hundred shipwrecked sailors in one autumn. So where does it come from? Number 15. Blake. One of the 14 tribes of Galway, the merchant families who ran that port city for centuries. And the name is a clue in itself. The Blakes came into Ireland with the Normans, under the name Cadell, and became known as Le Black, the Black, a nickname for a dark-complexioned man, until the nickname swallowed the original name entirely. If your name is Blake, the dark coloring is in the surname itself, and it is Norman, not Spanish. Number 14. Kirwan, another of the tribes of Galway, and the only one of the 14 that was purely Gaelic Irish, rather than Norman or Welsh. The name is O Ciard Haun, and it is built out of two Irish words for darkness stacked on top of each other. Ciar, dark, and Duv, black. Kirwan means, quite literally, the little dark black one. The name was describing dark Irish people, in Gaelic centuries before any Spanish ship left port. Number 13. Lynch, the most famous of the Galway tribes, and a name that ran that city as merchants and mayors. The Lynches were Norman, de Lench, and they built their wealth on trade with the continent, with Spain in particular. Galway ships ran wine and salt to and from Spanish ports for generations, and Spanish merchants lived in that city and married into it. So there is a genuine Spanish thread in the west of Ireland. It just did not arrive on a wreck. It arrived on a trade route, over centuries, through the front door of Galway harbour. Number 12. Darcy, also of the tribes of Galway, from the Norman Duarcy, though the name also exists in Ireland as the Gaelic O Dorchaithe, and that Gaelic version comes from Dorcha, the Irish word for dark. Two completely separate families, one Norman and one Gaelic, ended up sharing a surname in English, and one of them was named for being dark long before 1588. Number 11. Joyce, Connemara, in the wild country west of Galway, holds a district so associated with this family that it is called Joyce country. The Joyces came from Wales with the Norman incursion and married into the Gaelic West, and they were known for being physically large and dark. If your name is Joyce, your family became one of the most Gaelic-speaking Norman families in Ireland, in the exact country where the Black Irish story is set. Number 10. Connemara. A Connemara name, O Conghele, from the far western edge of Galway. This family carries its own legend. The old story on that coast says the Connelis are descended from seals, and that a Connelly will not eat seal meat because it is family. It is the kind of tale that grows up in a place so remote and sea-bound that the people there are explained by stories instead of records. That is the same soil the Armada legend grew in. Number 9. O'Malley. The great sea family of Mayo, whose motto was that they were valiant on land and sea, and whose most famous member, Grace O'Malley, commanded her own fleet and negotiated face-to-face with Queen Elizabeth. The O'Malleys were seafarers on the exact coast where the Armada broke up, which means that when those ships came apart on the rocks, it was families like this one standing on the shore watching it happen. If your family is from that coast, the sea in your history is Atlantic and Irish, not Spanish. Number 8. Gallagher. O Galshavour, one of the great names of Donegal and a leading family of the O'Dumnall lordship in the northwest. Donegal is where the largest Armada wrecks came ashore, and where the survivors were hunted hardest. Gallagher is one of the most numerous surnames in that county, and one of the most common Irish names in America. Number 7. Boyle. O Buihill, another of the ruling Donegal families, from the coast around the bay that still carries the name. The Donegal coast is the heart of the Black Irish story, because it is where the ships piled up. But the Boyles were in that country for 600 years before the Armada, and the dark coloring in that population was not new in 1588. Number 6. McSweeney. And here is real foreign blood, just not from Spain. The McSweeneys were gallowglass, heavy Scottish mercenary infantry, of Hebridean and Norse Gaelic descent, brought over to fight for the Irish lords from the 13th century onward. They came from the Scottish Isles, settled in Donegal, and became an Irish family. Thousands of gallowglass came the same way. If your name is McSweeney, your family were foreign fighters, who married in centuries before the Armada, and from the north. Number 5. Doherty. O Doherty, the lords of Inishowen, the great peninsula at the very top of Donegal. This is as far northwest as Ireland goes, the most Atlantic battered ground in the country, and one of the strongholds of the old Gaelic North. It is also the exact kind of place where the Armada story has been told at firesides for 400 years, in families whose blood is straight Gaelic. Before I show you the last 4, if you carry one of these names and you want to know what your family actually is, where the line really runs, and where it went afterward, I have put the whole thing together in a guide called The Bloodline Archive at dnaorigin.org, linked in the description. But stay right here, because the last 4 names on this list carry the answer inside them, in the Irish language, and they point in the opposite direction from Spain. Number 4. Doyle. O Dubhail. And this is where the language gives the game away. The name breaks into 2 words, Dub, meaning black or dark, and Gaul, meaning foreigner. Doyle means the dark foreigner. The Irish used it to describe the Vikings, distinguishing the dark-haired Danish raiders from the fair-haired Norwegians. So here is a surname that literally means dark stranger in Ireland, and the strangers it is describing sailed from Scandinavia, not Spain, 700 years before the Armada. Number 3. Dun. O Duin, from Don, the Irish word for brown. It is a color name, given to an ancestor for the color of his hair, and it is one of the most numerous surnames in Ireland. The point is that Gaelic Ireland had a whole vocabulary for describing its own people as brown and dark, and used it constantly, in a language that had no reason to reach for Spain. Number 2. Duggan. O Dubhagain, built on Duv again. The black one, the dark one. Duggans are spread across Munster and Connacht, in exactly the western counties where the Black Irish story lives, and the name was already recording dark-haired Irish people in the Gaelic records, centuries before any Armada sail appeared on the horizon. Which brings us to number 1, Duffy. O Dubhai, and the whole word is Dub, black. It is one of the most common surnames in Ireland, and one of the most common Irish surnames in America. It is thickest on the ground in Monaghan and in Donegal, and it means, without any ambiguity at all, the black one. It was given to an ancestor who was dark, and it was written down in Irish, in Ireland, by Irish speakers describing other Irish people. That is the answer, sitting in plain sight in the most ordinary name on this list. Ireland was already full of dark-haired people, and had its own words for them, long before 1588. The Gaelic language is stacked with them: Duv, Dorcha, Chiar, Don. There are dozens of surnames built out of nothing but words for dark, and they were all in use before the Armada was ever built. So, how many did you count? And now the twist I promised you. The Spanish story is not entirely wrong. It is just about 4,000 years too late. The people who settled Ireland came in layers. The hunter-gatherers came first. Then, around 6,000 years ago, the first farmers arrived. And those farmers had come the long way, out of the Near East, across the Mediterranean, up through Iberia, and finally by sea to Ireland. They brought agriculture, and they brought their own appearance, and ancient remains from that period in Ireland point to people who were dark-haired and dark-eyed. After them came the Bronze Age migration that brought the ancestry most Irish people carry most of today. But that first farming layer never disappeared. It is still in the population, and it is thickest where the Atlantic coast kept people in place. So there is a genuine old connection between Ireland and the Iberian Peninsula. It just has nothing to do with a shipwreck. It runs back to the Stone Age, to the people who brought the first cattle and the first wheat to that island, whose descendants are still standing in the west of Ireland, with dark hair, being told a story about Spanish sailors. And every other bit of foreign blood in these names came from the north. The Vikings, sitting inside the word Doyle. The Scottish gallowglass, sitting inside McSweeney. The Normans, sitting inside Blake and Lynch and Joyce. The Black Irish were not made by Spain. They were made by the oldest layer of the island itself, with Norse and Scottish and Norman blood layered on top. That is what these names really are. Not the proof of a romantic shipwreck, but something far older. The record of the first people who ever farmed that ground, carried in surnames that were describing dark-haired Irish families in the Irish language for 1,000 years before anyone thought to blame Spain. Your ancestors were not Spanish sailors. They were there first. So tell us in the comments, is your name on this list? What county did your family come out of? And where in the world did they finally land? And if you want to trace exactly where your own Irish bloodline really runs, the Bloodline Archive is waiting for you at dnaorigin.org, linked in the description. The story your family tells is 400 years old. The truth in your surname is 6,000. That is the whole story.